Everybody, I'm Maarten Daniels from the CEF eDelivery technical team, and I will run you through the process of conformance testing that the CEF team is now handing over from the eSense project. So this slide shows the service platform of eDelivery. And as you can see in the middle, in the yellow, in the middle blocks, you can see that we are providing two testing services. Those are connectivity testing and conformance testing. So this presentation is about conformance testing, so I will just briefly touch on the connectivity testing part. And actually, the connectivity testing is a very, very simple test that allows a implementation to check if they're up and running. It's consisting of sending a basic simple request message and receiving back a response message to one of our access points deployed in a cloud environment. So it's just to test basic connectivity. What we will be talking about in this slide pack is more advanced, and it's the conformance testing. So the goal of our conformance testing service is to verify if an implementation meets the requirements of the CEF eDelivery AS4 profile. And actually, the CEF eDelivery AS4 profile is equal to the eSense AS4 profile. So we are not only taking over the specifications from eSense into CEF, but we are also taking over the test platform for conformance testing from eSense into CEF. So actually, what will be done is there are test assertions available, and they have been derived from the specifications. And these test assertions are a textual description of what the implementation should be adhering to, what it should be doing. And there are different levels of test assertions. There are mandatory test assertions, preferred test assertions, and they are divided into a couple of groups. So these test assertions are then implemented on the test platform where they can be executed. So we consider a implementation to be conformant if all the mandatory test assertions will be completed successfully. For the optional ones, they are there. It's recommended that they are passed, but of course these are not mandatory for a successful conformant product. At the end of a full successful test run, we will have a test report available, which will then also be available to you. We will sign it so that it's guaranteed that whatever has been run is in fact correct. And we will provide it both to you as a software implementation, but we will also publish your details together with the test report on the CEF digital website, so that potential interested users of the AS4 solution can see who to contact and can make a choice for their preferred solution. So who are we targeting with this conformance test service? It's the software providers that actually just build an AS4 instance, let's say from scratch or in-house, and they want to check if what they have been coding really meets the standards that we are promoting. But it's also service providers who are reusing either the CEF sample implementation or any other open source implementation, but are changing a bit of the code or providing additional features on top of the code, and that want to check if their modifications still meet the requirements of the standards or the profile, of course. So here's an overview on how to use the service. Actually, a couple of teams will be involved, and the teams involved will be a CEF support team, a CEF technical team, and the stakeholder management office, which will have various roles throughout the process. As a first step, we will ask companies to register themselves and to provide some information about them, about their implementation, a point of contact. So this is just setting up our collaboration. Then in the second step, the preparation phase, we will send you all the information required to connect to the test platform called Minder, and also more details about how to run it and how to integrate with the test platform. We will also ask you to just perform a basic connectivity test to know that you're up and running before we would actually officially start a full test run. Then in the step 3, the execution phase, we will together with you execute all the test assertions, convert it into test cases on the platform. If there are some failures, we will help you to correct these failures, to rerun them, and whenever we and you think that everything is fine, we will do a final test run, and we will hopefully have only successful mandatory test cases passing. Then in the closing phase, in step 4, we will generate the test report, which will then be signed by our support team and be sent to you and published on the CEF digital website. This is then your proof of conformance that your implementation with that version that you have run on this particular date has passed all the tests of the profile. Now, why would you use this conformance testing service? We have heard in previous sessions, for example, there's also Drummond testing. You could also read the specifications yourselves and ask one of your developers or testers to just test the product against these specifications, or you could set up a collaboration with other AS4 vendors and just bilaterally or let's say in a more mesh setup test the specifications. So why would you use the service? Actually, because it would be a reduced cost and time for you, because the platform is there, it's functioning, it has already been run against previous implementations, so for you, you don't need to worry that you're still in an experimental phase or that you would lose time in perfecting the platform. Another benefit is awareness and quality. So, as also has been mentioned previously, there's always something that you have overseen or where you are not really 100% conformant with. So this will generate the awareness for you, and you will be able to improve the quality of your own product. Also, it's domain independent, so it doesn't matter where we are testing. If you're planning to go for the procurement domain or for a justice domain, the tests are generic and they provide a good level of assurance, let's say in its genericity, without being domain specific. Now, because the Minder test platform can be deployed on a cloud, can be is deployed on a server. There's nothing special to be done for that. We have a version deployed that you can access anytime, anywhere, and there are no time restrictions, let's say, for the testing. It's also scalable. We could eventually deploy multiple instances. It's easy to use. And yes, it has been done a couple of times before in the eSense project. We are also having a couple of successful test runs ourselves on the CEF platform, so actually it goes quite smooth. This brings me to the end of the presentation, but I would like to comment on a couple of, let's say, previous discussions to make it clear what we are offering, what we are not offering, and to provide a bit more of the context. For example, somebody mentioned that there's significant time needed to connect to the platform and to run through all the tests. And actually in the eSense project, sometimes this might have been true because the test assertions were still under development, the test platform and the connector to the test platform was actually being developed together with performing the test cases. So the vendors that were actually running the tests back then helped improving the system. So I mean, what they have done was very valuable, but of course delayed their progress a little bit. So whoever comes on board now can benefit from the work and the effort that they have already spent in eSense, and this time is not required anymore now, so that's a huge benefit to them. Also, there has been a mention of using Basecamp. Actually, this is also particular to the eSense project, because soon the collaborative spaces on the CEF single web portal will be available, and the goal is that everybody interested in CEF or in the AS4 profile or any other, let's say, building block of CEF will be able to share his experiences or to join the community on those collaborative spaces, and they don't need to go to the eSense Basecamp project anymore. I mean, they can do, of course, for eSense specific tasks, but there's not a need for CEF related items to then go to the Basecamp group. Also, interoperability testing. So what we are talking about right now and what CEF is offering is a conformance test platform. eSense, the project, has been doing interoperability testing and might actually still continue to do interoperability testing for, let's say, the next year. But for the moment, CEF is focusing on conformance testing, so making sure that implementations are conformant to the specifications. Interoperability testing can be a next focus, but for the moment we are focusing on conformance testing. So it's not that if you enter the conformance testing phase that you are obliged to do interoperability testing. You can do just conformance testing, and you will get a proof of conformance, and this is where, let's say, where you can choose to stop. It's also not required that you do pilot testing, that you join a justice, a procurement, or any other pilot. You can just go for the conformance testing service. Now, this also means that the time that we would require, or that actually the time that the process requires for you to connect, can be quite limited. And also the time required to do a test run can be limited, because the project or the solution, the platform, the test cases, they're not under development anymore. We can expect that it will take definitely some days or maybe even a couple of weeks to perform everything. But if you will be able to focus, I'm really hoping that we won't go into past experiences where, due to let's say other priorities or some issues with test cases or anything else, caused let's say a couple of weeks or a couple of months delay. So I'm not expecting that this should happen in the conformance testing service right now, or as from now. Also, there is no need for interaction with other vendors. I mean, you can of course choose to interact with other vendors. We would even encourage that, but it's not that you need to talk to other vendors or that you will be obliged to be boxed into a specific test run or a specific test period. I mean, the option will be open for you continuously, and you can just come yourself and we will do the conformance testing with you. So indeed, we are now talking about AS4 today, because that's our primary focus for the conformance testing service, but it will also cover other components, such as, for example, SMP. So don't consider that this is the final stage. We will open up the conformance testing service for other components as well. Okay, that's a little bit the context I wanted to provide. So if you have any questions now or later on, please let me know.
Thank you very much. Maarten, are there any questions from the floor? Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Maarten, for your explanations. I want to ask a question which is also a reminder. What is the status of what are the plans about performing an interrupt test with Minder so as to automatize all the, the time reduction and stuff? Thank you.
Indeed, I mean, it is a possibility to do interoperability testing with Minder, and that could be indeed valuable. I think it's now up to CEF and to eSense to define if, how, and when this should be done. Because for the moment, CEF is focusing on conformance testing, and it could be that interoperability testing is done in the context of eSense, but that's up to discussions, I think.